Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast, episode number 33. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey folks, this is Jim Kruger from Antleritis.com, and you're listening to the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Jay Scott, your host of the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast, and thank you for joining us again for episode number 33. Here with my good friend and field correspondent from Ohio, Dusty Phillips. Dusty, what's going on, man?
You know, not a whole lot. Cold weather, it just makes you lazy.
I've noticed that.
Just makes you want to stay at home, you know. So it's cold here in Ohio.
Yep, cold here too.
But I think we're going to heat it up with getting Matt on the show tonight.
This is one of our best shows that we're going to do. And the reason that it's going to be this way is because we love storytelling. The storytelling about the harvest of the big buck is the story that we love like no other. The story like you told about Chubby Tines that kicked off your entire Chubby Tines career on Facebook. The story of the big deer and the harvest and the electricity that goes through your mind and your fingertips just before you release the arrow or pull the trigger. That's all the stuff that we love to hear about because that's real and it's everything that you almost relive for those moments that you actually shot a big deer.
Right on.
Right on, man. So we have a special guest tonight, a guy named Matt Hiatt.
With Big Frank.
Big Frank. The story of Big Frank. Big Frank is this big, wide deer. And
what a buck.
You're going to be seeing the pictures of Big Frank. It's going to be on the blog post. What a massive buck. And Big Frank didn't score out particularly high for what it is, but the wideness, 33 inches.
It had to look like a plane coming through the woods.
It had to. It's just one of the widest racks you'll ever see. The tines are not that tall, but it's actually an older deer, so it's actually on a decline. However,
right. I think if he took off running, he had to call to the airport and get permission to take flight.
FAA. He had to call the FAA to see if he could
run.
Permission to do a flyby.
It's a wide one.
It is a wide one. So got Matt from Centerville, Ohio, and he's going to tell us the entire story behind Big Frank.
Let's get to talking about Big Frank.
Matt, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Hey, we're psyched to have you on. Anytime we get a giant buck sent in, we're very interested in talking to you. So thanks for joining us tonight. This is fantastic.
Yeah, awesome. Welcome aboard.
No problem, guys. Happy to share the story.
As you can tell, Dusty and I are fascinated by big bucks. You can tell by the name of our show here, the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast and Chubby Tines Outdoors. So we, in a sense, you are a celebrity to us, because
for sure,
because you harvested a giant buck. We love this stuff, and the pictures that you sent in, they went up on my wall immediately. They're just awesome. We played a little Score That Buck initially, and it was great to see what everybody thought about it. And some people nailed it right on the money, but I think they might have seen your scorecard because it was perfect. But it's just interesting to see.
Well, that picture made it around in the scorecard did a while back, so I'm sure anybody that got that one pretty close.
Yeah, it's a fun game to play. But as I often say, that every picture is worth 1,000 words, and here on the Big Buck Registry, we like to take those 1,000 words and put them into words. So we want to hear the story behind the big buck and find out all your tips and tricks and maybe share a few things with us along the way that will make us better hunters down the road.
All right.
Matt, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
I'm from Southwest Ohio. I'm born and raised here. 32 years old now, and been hunting since I was a little guy.
Yeah.
Dad took us out squirrel hunting when we were growing up, and it got to the point I'd want to go hunting, and Dad, he'd not get off work till 5:30 or so, and it'd be getting dark, so I'd coerce my grandpa, who didn't hunt, and taking me out and just sit next to me because I wasn't allowed to go out by myself. But he'd go out and sit with me, and I never did get anything then, but it was always a good time.
Sure.
Got to hang out with my grandpa also.
Absolutely. How old were you at that point?
Probably 12, maybe.
Right. So your passion ran deep, and you think your dad had a little to do with that, just kind of getting you out when he could, and then when he wasn't around,
oh, definitely.
You just it's one of those passions that runs deep in your blood.
Yeah, Dad, he was always, gun safety. Like when my brother and I were little, before we even got our first BB gun, we had to memorize the 10 gun safety laws before they'd let us touch the gun. So we spent like days going over that thing and memorizing it so we could recite it verbatim. And he was always real good about taking us out and showing us like the trees and different things and learning to respect the land. And the thing that really got me into deer hunting, though, was the neighbor we had, Todd. He was big into deer hunting, and they'd always do their week gun trip, and I was too young to go at the time, but when they'd get back from their gun hunt week, I'd always go running over there. They'd have deer lined up all over that they'd got, and he ended up taking me out one morning, and I remember it like it was yesterday. He rattled, and it was still dark, though, and a deer came in. I could hear it grunting, and I thought it was a pig.
Right.
And it was the most exciting thing I ever went through in my life at that point, it seemed like. And from that moment, I was hooked. And he took me out a couple more times, and then that's when I started. Like, I'm just going to figure it out on my own. And Dad would go out with me sometimes when he could, and I was hooked.
Man, I can relate to that story. How about you, Dusty?
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome.
That just kind of that summary of how you got introduced to hunting in the first place is very similar to my kind of stuff. My dad would take me hunting, but he was often working, so I'd just go anyway. And it made me not even carrying a gun, but I'd go and I'd pretend like I was hunting. I'd try to figure it out, And when I first had that interaction with a deer, I was hooked for life. I was like, how can you not come out here in the deepest parts of the woods and sit there and interact with animals in a way that you couldn't explain to other people except people who have actually done it themselves?
Oh, exactly. People that have never experienced it, they honestly they don't know what they're missing. You can't explain it to them.
Right.
Someone needs to experience the peace and just soaking up what God's put on the earth for us to look at,
Exactly. Could not agree with that more. So, Matt, you grew up in Southwest Ohio, and what was life like growing up?
I grew up in Waynesville, so it was a small town.
Okay.
We lived kind of out in the country, so it was mostly my brother and I'd play with the kids in the neighborhood, and, slow compared to maybe what somebody in a more populated area would experience. But
sure. So it was country life.
Yep. Yeah. We had the sports that we'd do, baseball, football. And,
sure.
But, we'd spend as much time outside, growing up, building forts, digging holes and putting plywood over them and hiding under them and all that good stuff, shooting all the birds in the yard with BB guns.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like we're the kind of. I grew up in New Hampshire, but it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in because Waynesville is not too far from me, and you got a good fishing hole, some antique malls, and a McDonald's. That's about what you got going in Waynesville.
That's pretty much it. But I loved it. Great town.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there's that kind of lifestyle leads you to some great experiences, especially in the woods, and it makes you an expert. It makes you an expert in the field. And it's something you never want to trade for anything once you have those skill sets and understand that way of life. I don't believe. I would never want to trade it. I can't imagine anybody I've ever talked to would never trade it for anything. So there's something very special about that whole thing. Matt, I want to get into a little bit of your skill set. You don't just harvest a buck like this by chance, generally speaking. So there must be some things that you're doing better than other people that aren't shooting deer like this. And I don't want like coordinates where you got the buck or that kind of stuff, but I would like to know some of the things that you do to prepare for the hunt. And I'm going to have Dusty kind of walk through that stuff with you. But I'd like to hear a little bit about how you developed your skill set and what you do religiously before you step into the woods.
All right.
Let's start it off by, how do you find a location like where you hunt? Is it family land, or did your dad turn you on to the land? Tell us how you got where you're at as far as on the piece of land that you hunt.
Well, as you know, living around here, it's tough to find land, so you kind of take what you can get. So luckily I've got some good friends that actually have some land. And most of the tracts of land that I hunt aren't right around where I live. Most of them are under 100 acres even. Lots of subdivisions going in, So every year you're like, hopefully I get another 2 years out of this spot. But when I go after a property, which most of them that I've had for quite a while, and most of the spots I hunt now are within 5 or 6 miles of like where I grew up. And so it's more, I didn't necessarily pick the particular property that's what I fell into, being able to get permission to get, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that's the big obstacle around here. It's because there's so many, just the landowners are getting to the point where they're worried about liability, or maybe somebody's coming in and throwing a lot of money at them so that they can hunt it and nobody else can. So luckily I've been blessed with knowing the right people to be able to get permission to hunt some good properties, which I've got a few properties that I hunt, and I mean, really anywhere you can get to hunt around here, if there's deer on it, you stand a good chance at killing a 140 plus easy.
Right, yeah, I can agree with that. I can agree with that for sure. Ohio's got some nice bucks up and coming, and there have been some nice bucks shot over the years, and you're very fortunate that you can say you're one of the class that killed a nice buck. Let's get into a little bit of detail on as far as preparation. Once you've got permission to hunt on a spot, where do you go from there?
Well, if I know somebody that's hunted there, first thing I'll do is I will grill them. I want to know where they saw deer, what was planted in the fields that particular year, because movements will change, from beans to corn, and whether acorns were dropping. I mean, I'll just try and find every little detail that I can. And then if I experience it in the future, I can kind of think back and use that.
Relate to their situation. Right, yeah, that's awesome.
But I do a lot of staring at Google. I look at maps like you wouldn't believe, looking for funnels, like pinch points, and just little things that stand out as what you'd call textbook good. That it doesn't always work out, but it's a good starting point if you haven't been out there just yet.
Yeah, knowing your land.
Dusty, can I jump in here for a question real quick?
Yeah, come on,
Matt. When you're talking to these, it sounds like you're almost interrogating the landowner in a sense.
No, it's not that bad.
Well, but you grill them, right? I mean, you want to get down to what's going on there. I mean, it sounds like a great tactic. How do you approach somebody like that? I mean, it's a farmer that owns land?
Friends.
Okay.
That have hunted it, but I know the farmers that farm that really well.
Yep.
So I go in, I stop in and talk to them 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
I get along with them well. They're good to talk to, and farmer's full of information.
That's exactly right. I was getting ready. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Farmers can be your best friends, really, as a hunter.
Yeah, they're out there.
Yeah. I mean, I told them if I got enough deer, I'll give them the deer.
Right.
They don't really hunt, but they like the deer meat. So,
right.
I mean, I'm not doing it just to get information out of them. I genuinely like them, just being nice. But
sure.
You stop in, and if maybe you don't know them like I do for somebody else, stop in. I mean, maybe offer to help them with something.
Sure.
If you're actually able to.
I like farmers a lot. I think they're just very interesting people. They work the land for their living, and I think that's fascinating. But they're out, like as you said, they're out there all the time, and they get to know what's every nook and cranny, every creature that's out there. They'll know.
Oh yeah, and they're willing to throw information at you, right. Unless they're a hunter. But not that many farmers are big hunters during the time of year when I'm hunting, because that's when they're out there working. Yeah. From the time it gets light till it gets dark.
Right. And I always found that fascinating too. Yeah. So,
and they want the deer gone.
But basically, you're developing a relationship. I guess that's the key that I'm pointing out here. Is you're developing a relationship with these people that are the key to some of the knowledge about the land itself. And it's
definitely.
And that's very important. What you mentioned maps. What kind of maps are you looking at?
Usually I've got Google Earth downloaded to my computer, and where I live, it's not that big of a deal. But I've had a lease in Kentucky. It ended up turning out horribly because there was 4 of us on it, but 50 people that weren't on it hunted it. But looking at that before we went down there, you can rotate the screen so you're not looking from above, you're looking from the side, so you can see the contours and notice maybe where a bunch of pinch points come together or ravines come together for funnels, and give you a good idea of. This was a big lease, and it was 875 acres, and it was all woods. So I'm not about to just go down there and start wandering around without a plan. So usually it's Google Earth is what I use most of the time.
Google Earth,
free and simple.
Now, how do you start to identify the pinch points from the Google Earth maps? What things stick out in your mind when you're reading these?
Well, when I find a new property, I'll look finally, and I'll try and outline the property lines the best I can. Mm-hmm. And then if it's a hilly area, if you rotate it down to where you're looking, instead of looking from directly above the property, you can see like hills.
Yep.
So then if I'd say there's a ridge that had 3 fingers coming off of it, where all 3 of those fingers met, you'd have 3 valleys meeting up. I'd mark that on the map and then put it to my GPS, so when I was walking around, I'd be like, this is the first spot I want to scout. Or maybe I'll look for, if it's extremely hilly, a nice ledge that is the easy way to get from point A to point B for the deer. But up around, like in Ohio here, it's more like on the particular spot where I shot this buck there's a field edge, and then there's a pond back in the woods, and to the north of the pond there's a house and where people live and whatnot. So the only way for deer to get from the big block of woods to another still attached to it block of woods is a 100-yard area between the field edge and the woods, or the field edge and the pond.
Gotcha.
So I put my stand kind of in that area because I knew that was going to be my rut spot. I figured bucks are going to be moving from one section of the woods to the other, and the only way to get there is past me.
So you're looking for these cover areas where bucks would, or even deer in general, would feel comfortable moving through because they don't want to get out into the open, exposed areas or routes where the travel is easier for them because the rest of the terrain is rough for them. So those are the types of things that you're reading in your mind as you're looking at these maps. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Okay.
I mean, up here in Ohio, the biggest obstacle in the woods forms either going to be if there's a fence, which isn't much of an obstacle, but honeysuckle maybe. I mean, there's not that many hills where I hunt. I mean, the biggest hill on the property I'm hunting, where I shot that buck's 7 inches deep. So
Gotcha.
Relatively flat, but so I'm using big things like a pond. They're not going to cross the pond, and there's a flooded area that comes out of the pond that pushes them a little further away from the pond, so it kind of pinches them down.
Gotcha. Natural areas where they have to get more concentrated in their travel.
Oh, definitely. I've never tried this, but one of my buddies, he was telling me he's actually taken rope before and run it across a section of woods toward his tree stand because deer will take the easiest route.
Yep.
And just putting that rope up, deer will just, instead of jumping it, they'll walk a couple 100 yards down to walk around it. I'm going to try it this year.
It's interesting you say that because I've actually built barriers with just trees, like little, not very big trees, to make them more or less funnel towards me, and it worked. It worked quite well, actually, and I was amazed. I didn't know if it would, but it just seemed like, hey, they tend to go where it's easier to travel, still feeling in the cover, and it worked like a charm. So I agree. I think that kind of stuff works. Sorry to interject. Go ahead, Dusty. Keep on rolling.
No, very interesting. The Google Maps is definitely a great feature to check out a piece of property that you're just getting introduced to, for sure. That's kind of a great tip to use for the hunters that listen to the show. Anyway, so you got this piece of land figured out, and do you guys do much with food plotting?
Not out there, we don't, because it's either thick woods where nothing would grow because it wouldn't get enough light, really. And then there's a 50, 60 acre field on one side, and then there's a smaller, about 8 acre field that's kind of in between them. There used to be a building, and now it's gone, but it's all like mostly clover, but tall grass as well. And the farmers mow it a couple times a year just to make it easy enough to get the semis back there without getting stuck to get the crops out. And the deer in that pretty good.
All right, just kind of a natural feeding area, kind of a grazing area.
Yeah, I mean, we put some food plots out on other properties, but this year we're going to go in and do some work on those woods here in about 2 months because I really want the deer that's the offspring or brother or whatever of the one I shot. So we're going to go in and clear out an area right off the edge of the woods and put a food plot back into the woods. And we're going to put it on the field, or the field I want to put it off of is on the south side of the woods, so it should get plenty of light if we cut it back into the woods off the edge of the field. And there's a stand of oaks right there as well. And we're going to have the farmer leave us a small section as well in an area where the wind should be good for us to hunt, and put maybe 2 acres of, we haven't decided exactly what, but something that'll be green for a good while, and put it out in the field to help us out.
Right, just to keep him there and get him to move and eat in there. You know, that's a key factor. After you get, go ahead.
Oh no, you're good.
Once you get all your preparation set up, let's walk through a little bit about getting prepared to head out to the tree stand. Is there any soaps, washes, any scent control that you use prior to heading to the woods? Let's say we're getting up and it's getting close to season. You're getting yourself prepared to go to the woods. Give us a little rundown of how you get ready to head out for opening day and from there on.
Well, we go out quite a bit in just glass fields if they're beans before season. But in terms of how I get ready, once deer season starts, I start wearing all the scent-free deodorant and don't wear any cologne, and I'm kind of weird about all that stuff. So in the mornings I hunt, or if I know I'm going to hunt tomorrow, today even, I'll use the scent-free shower stuff and or scent, like a cover lotion of some sort, whether it's earth scent or whatever it is. And but I'm big on the showers and the sprays and bringing some scent wafers out there.
Right.
I'm not really good about hunting the wind.
Matt, we don't think that's weird, by the way. We think that's normal.
Yeah. Let's get a little deeper into that. You said something that we haven't heard. The scent-free lotion. Tell us who it's made by and where you pick it up at.
Buffs to Buck actually makes it. They've got a earth cover scent lotion and a pine one. And you know how bad you get dried out sitting out there all winter long in a tree stand, right?
Yeah.
And this stuff, it smells like dirt. It's amazing. So right after I get out of the shower, I smear it all over my arms and around my neck and put it up on my face. And then you've got that layer of cover scent right under all your clothes. And then once you spray yourself down on the outside, it's just one extra layer of scent protection.
When you talk about spraying yourself down, we're just kind of breaking you down and getting all the details on what kind of products do you use. Tell us what you use for a scent control spray.
To be honest, I don't know what I used last year right offhand. It was, it's got silver in it, whatever I was using.
All right.
Right.
Hunt Upwind, I think.
Hunt Upwind.
That's what I used this past year. But prior to that, I used just the Hunter Specialties, the stuff I got at Walmart for cheap.
Yeah,
right.
Gotcha. Right, yeah.
And I'd always had luck with it. And I used to use a lot of the earth scent for that, but I switched over, no real reason, to the just straight up scent killer.
Excellent. So you got yourself all lotioned up. You're scent free. What kind of camouflage do you prefer?
I've got everything in Realtree AP now. I don't really have much of a preference, really, but I started getting Realtree stuff, and I like everything to match.
Yeah, the proof's on the wall, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, most camouflage sells to hunters more than deer because, you know, that old Realtree stuff 20 years ago worked. But I like to look pretty when I'm out there, you know. So I like it all to match.
Yeah,
I think,
sure.
I think Jay can relate to that, you know.
Yeah, although sometimes I look a little mismatched, but yeah, I've still got my old suit that I like to wear, and it's all the same colors. But you know, it's only because it's the newest suit I have, and it all seemed to match when I bought it. But yeah, no, I can appreciate that, definitely.
It makes for better pictures if you coordinate.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah,
I learned that from my wife.
Yeah, I guess I can agree to that. You know, it does make for better pictures.
I have to tell you about just interject real quick. I had somebody send in a picture today of a deer mount, and the guy got dressed up in his camouflage to take a picture with him in the mount. You know, so he's holding the deer mount, but you could tell he went out and actually got dressed up in his camo just to take the picture with the deer to send into the Big Buck Registry. I was laughing; it was pretty funny, but I understand.
Yeah, right. But you know, it made for a good picture, and that's pretty cool.
I'll be honest, I've done that.
Sure, I have too.
Because I sent my My article I wrote for my deer, me and another guy wrote it, that he had 105 trail camera pictures of this deer. And I still to this day don't have a good picture of me with my deer in the woods, because right after I shot it, my wife, I texted her and she said they just admitted her into labor. So I was like,
oh wow, gotcha.
I told her, I was like, well, I wait my standard hour after I shoot. I was like, so it's going to be at least 2 hours before I get anywhere.
Right.
And so all the pictures I have were taken on cell phones.
Right, and cell phones take pretty good pictures too. So
they do, but for the magazine, they needed one to blow up. So there's me in the backyard taking pictures of myself.
That's all right though.
Yeah, but it's not as good.
Gotcha.
Whenever you see a lot of pictures that are in magazines, and some of them they look like they're actually out in the woods with the deer the day they harvested, but it's a mount, and that you're talking about having everything together and making nice pictures, and that's okay. And it seems like the more pictures that we see nowadays are looking more professional, that's just the way it is.
Oh, definitely. I mean, people are starting to learn, the guys that do it for TV or DVDs or whatever, people start learning how they're seeing those guys in the pictures to make a picture look better.
Yep.
So it's definitely letting people show what their deer really are a little easier than the standard get right up close to it with the antlers in your chest, and doesn't make it look as nice.
Now, Matt, we've gone through the kind of your setup and your gear check and all that kind of stuff. And what kind of bow do you usually shoot?
I've got a Matthew Z7.
Matthew Z7. All right. Now, Dusty, I've been withholding some information from you about this deer, and the reason I've done this is because I know how infatuated you are with naming your deer. The name of Matt's buck is named. Are you ready for this?
Let Matt tell it.
Matt, what's the name of your buck?
Big Frank is the name of my deer.
Big Frank. Yeah.
Big Frank.
That's what I'm talking about. So Big Frank. I want to get into the hunt of Big Frank. Are you ready, Dusty?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Let's get into the hunt, Matt.
Okay. First, I'll tell you, Big Frank was the name. Eric, a guy that hunts the property next to it, he named it that.
Okay.
So I took this name on because he'd been hunting it, and I ended up meeting the guy through a friend that I'd sent a picture of one of my trail cameras to.
Yep.
And he showed it to a guy at work, and I was like, oh, it's a nice buck. It's 140 inches, because it was a horrible picture that I got. He showed it to a guy, and that guy's like, oh my gosh, that's Big Frank. He ended up calling me like 2 days later.
It's a great name.
He's like, where'd you get that picture? And somebody that I don't know calls me and says, where'd you just get this picture? I'm like, who are you? And I start county-wide and narrow it down, and he's narrowing his area down, and we narrow it down to our properties butt up against each other.
Wow, that's awesome.
And he didn't give me any more information at the time. Super nice guy. I'm good friends with him now.
Right.
Yeah, that seems to be the case when there's a big buck involved. No information on either end.
Yeah, but I mean, I get it. We all get it.
Sure.
But the day of the hunt, I got up. I'd actually had a trail camera picture that I went out and pulled a card a couple days earlier. On the 27th of October, I had a picture in front of my tree stand over a mock scrape I'd built, and it was at 5:35 in the morning. And that was the 27th. And then Hurricane Sandy moved in. So we had nasty storms, high winds, and all that good stuff. And I take about a week off every year, early November, to deer hunt, and November 1st was my first day of vacation. And it happened to be the first day after the storm that it was calm. So, I knew that was coming. I was like, this is going to be amazing. Deer have been pinned down for a few days. I'm going to get out there. The rut could be getting ready to pick up. And so I was super excited. I woke up extra early, just on my own, and I got out there after a nice Cliff Bar and a coffee on the way out there. I sat down at 6:18 in the morning and sat there. Finally got light around 7:30. I wasn't ready for it. I thought it got light earlier.
Right.
And over the past couple weeks before that, when I was hunting, which I don't hunt a whole lot until November, really.
Okay.
Just because I don't like to push deer out of the woods, and I'd prefer to be out there when it's extra exciting. And so right when it got light enough to see good and shoot, and I started banking some antlers together, and I had this little buck come trotting in. Same, I'd seen him 4 or 5 times, but he wandered off to the east of me after he ran through and didn't see what he was looking for.
You're in your stand at this point, Matt?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess I skipped a spot for you.
That's okay. How high up were you?
That stand is about 20 foot up.
20 foot. And what kind of stand are you using?
I've got a bunch of different stands.
Okay.
That one is, I couldn't even tell you.
Okay.
Probably a Field and Stream. It's got armrests and a footrest.
It's a
two of
ladder
my favorite
stand?
features on a tree stand. No, I've got a set of the climbing sticks that go up there, that run up the tree, a 20-foot section.
Yep.
So it's a hang-on.
Hang on with some climbing sticks. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
I failed to mention, that tree stand's about 150 yards in the woods.
Okay.
And it's in that pinch point, kind of. And when I got to the edge of the field, maybe 5 feet from the edge of the woods, I'm a big fan of drag rags. So I spray some dough and estrus on it, and I drag it the rest of the way in, and then I hang it up on a branch in front of me. But I had 2 or 3 mock scrapes I'd built around there. So once I was up there, and then I rattled, the little buck came in, and he disappeared off to the east. And then I just sat there quietly, figured I'd wait a while. And around 8:20, I heard what sounded like a football team coming from the east. It was a little north of me, and then I saw a doe go darting through 35 yards or so out from me. And she was a little doe, too, so I'm a little baffled because usually the younger ones, don't come into heat until a little bit later, and then there's this little tiny buck that I'd seen earlier. He's right on her, and they ran through, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Maybe there's some action about to happen. And then I heard something else to the east, and I looked, and I saw what made my heart stop briefly. I saw this deer, and he's 30-some inches wide, and he's just like fingering his antlers through this thick honeysuckle and knocking stuff over the whole way. And then he's 35 yards out through some thick stuff, and he goes running through, and I'm like, great. He's not going anywhere that doe's not at, And then the little buck ended up running back right under me. And the doe turned, with the big buck's right on her at this point, and she turned, and she's now walking straight at me. I'm already stood up, got my bow in my hand. I'm trying to film this hunt, too, by myself. So I've got this camera just pointed in the general direction they are, record hit, zoomed out all the way. And she's kind of just slowly walking at me. He's hanging out 15 yards behind her. She takes a step, he takes a step. And I'm thinking, well, this could be good. She's walking my direction. He's going to come my direction. At 10 yards, she stops and stares right at me.
Up in the tree?
Oh, yeah. Like, our eyes met, I felt like.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm standing there quivering. Like, I'm cold, freezing cold, but it's not cold out, nervous. And you can't hear it on the video, but I don't know how. The deer didn't hear it and whatever, but I know I'm sitting there saying, Matt, get your stuff together, because I know my knees they're knocking.
Right.
And I know I'm physically shaking at this point. And all I'm saying, get your stuff together. Don't spook the doe. If you don't spook her, things should work out.
Right.
And she ends up staring at me for what seemed like forever. I've got video of the whole thing too. And
wow.
It's really like 15 seconds. And then she ends up kind of walking within 6 or 7 yards of my tree under me. And at this point, the buck starts moving towards me. And he gets maybe, and I can't move at this point still, he gets maybe 20 yards away, and he turns to my right. And there's not really a shooting lane in that direction. And the camera's in the way, in the arm. And he ends up walking kind of at a 45 parallel to me and walks behind this giant tree. Right when he did that, on the video, all you see is the camera go flying. Because I threw this camera and camera arm out of the way, and I drew my bow, and God willing, there was a hole the size of a paper plate and the honeysuckle on the other side of this tree.
Oh, wow.
And he walks by and stops right behind this hole, and I'm like, wow. And he's at 18 yards, let the arrow go, and I didn't know what happened. I'm like, I know I hit him, because I didn't hear the arrow hit anything, so it had to go through that little hole, and he ran off to the north. It's so thick I couldn't see him more than 20 yards out. And so I sat down, and I'm talking to myself at this point. Like, get your stuff together. I need to send a text message to somebody. So I text my wife, like, hey, I just shot this deer, like the one I was after. And she's like, oh, awesome. Good news. The doctor just said I'm going into labor, so hurry.
Oh, man.
The baby wasn't really due for 3 more weeks, so I didn't think it was a factor at the point.
Right.
And then she tells me this. I'm like, crap, I need to move. But like I said, I got about an hour rule. no matter how good I think I hit something, I like to give it a solid hour unless I physically watch it go down myself. So at that point, I'm like, I need to call Eric. That's the guy from the property next to it. So I give him a call. He answers. I'm like, hey, dude, I got bad news for you. He's like, no way. I was like, yeah. And he's like, I'll be over there here in a minute.
Right.
He's at work. And then I called my buddy, the landowner, and he shot right out. He was out there half an hour later. But after I called him, I got down and went over to look for my arrow, and I didn't find it. And so that was depressing. And I followed with some blood for maybe 10, 15 yards. And it wasn't the best blood trail ever. And I was shooting the NAP two-blade blood runners. So, I mean, it puts a giant hole in it where it goes in. So I was a little disturbed, but like I saw it on a tree and it was up at a good height. So that was a confidence builder for me. But I quit looking because I was like, I don't want to push it if it's right up here and it's not gone yet. So I waited, and my buddy got out there. He's extremely impatient. So half an hour's passed, and he starts looking. He makes it 5 yards past where I quit looking, and it looks like somebody took 5-gallon buckets and started dumping them of blood. So we kept going, and it was 20 yards further. And
no kidding.
We were like, oh my gosh. Like, it hadn't really sunk in how big it was until we got up to it. And, I mean, when his head was laying on the ground, his antlers are sticking, I don't know, almost up to your waist, just the way they're sitting. And then, so we took a couple pictures, and then Eric and the guy I'd originally sent that text message to came out with him, and they helped me drag it out. And it was...
That's fantastic.
Something else, though. But he was a big deer.
He is a big deer. It was a big deer. See, did you have a concept of how wide he was from where you were in the stand? Could you tell, or was it just too thick to get a real good gauge on it?
I didn't look, to be honest.
Okay.
Once I see that I'm going to shoot something, like I give him my quick look, and I'm like, that's a deer I'm willing to shoot. I quit looking at antler as much as I can. That's
the quintessential cure to buck fever right there. Like, you just don't get focused on it. You just focused on the body from then on. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I failed at that because I about fell out of the tree because I'm standing there and quivering. But
right.
If I'd have looked at antlers, I don't know how bad it would have been.
Right, but the buck fever thing is, I think, an extrapolation of that anxiety and nervousness. And then you're just trying to, you can't help but look at the antlers, but if you can at least get the antlers out of your head, then the buck fever, quote unquote, goes away.
Exactly. I mean, for the sad thing, not sad, I mean, it's why I love hunting, but I could have 5 does in front of me. I could have 3 bucks in front of me, and I'm not going to shoot any of them. I know that.
Right.
But with the doe, sometimes I'll be like, I'm not shooting a doe today. I can sit there and they'll be in front of me. I can be calm as anybody, and maybe I decide I'm going to shoot one. I'll start quivering.
Absolutely.
There's no better feeling.
I mean, if I lose that, I'd quit hunting.
Yeah, and you should. You know, if you're not feeling that, you should just don't even bother. But it's that moment, it's that little piece of nervous energy that flows through you when you're about to take the shot. That's really that piece that I think keeps everybody coming back. It's
definitely
an insane, intense moment of excitement that you know. It's very few things in life match that. But yeah, that's the great part is you can experience it almost every year, because usually if you're a good hunter, you're going to put yourself in those positions where you're going to have that opportunity.
Oh yeah, I mean, and for as long as somebody's happy with something, I mean, I don't care if it's 110 inches, because I've talked to plenty of people that hunt, and I've had people send me pictures of deer. Should I shoot this one? I don't know. Would you be happy if you shot it?
Right. I think that's an individual thing. That's not for somebody else to call. That's for you to decide.
Like, how often do you hunt? I hunt a lot, so I've got my set standard anyways. Like, and then I've got my whole rule of don't pass up the first day, but you'll shoot the last day. But like, it's all about individual for that. Like, what thrills you may not be what thrills me. It may be bigger than what thrills me. You know.
Right.
So yeah, it's just, I love the excitement of that part.
And that's the story of Big Frank. That's awesome. Very cool.
Big Frank.
Luckily, I took him up to the Deer and Turkey Expo in Ohio, and he got second place for current year archery typical. I mean, The buck that beat him was a beautiful deer, but the fact that I had 20 inches of deductions didn't help me.
Right. But Frank's a wide rack.
Oh yeah, he was 33 inches even with his greatest spread.
Good God.
No, that's some spread.
That's a spread like no other. Wow.
And the sad, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm more than thrilled with it, but he was bigger the year before.
Oh, he was.
He got a little messier this year and lost some length, and that's about it.
Interesting. Yeah.
But they guessed him to be 8.5 years old.
So he was more or less the year before he would have been prime, and the year that you harvested him would have been the first year of his decline. Is that the way you're seeing it?
Yeah, I mean he weighed 245 when we dressed him out.
Wow, big buck.
Is what they, when I took him over to the processor, they weighed him, and I was like, good night. I'm glad I had 4 guys dragging it.
Absolutely, that's a big deer to drag by yourself. How big are you, Matt?
I'm about 180 pounds.
Okay, so he had you by 60 pounds, and you needed some help with this big guy.
I could have done it. I'm in pretty good shape, but why do it when you got friends, right?
That's a tractor buck. That's a buck for the tractor. You go get the tractor for that buck.
Yeah, I mean, if you like a challenge, sure, but
we only had to drag him really 75 yards to the field edge, and then threw him in a truck.
Matt, how wide? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
How wide was the pinch point that you were hunting? You said you were in the woods about 150 yards, but how wide was the total pinch point you were looking at?
Well, it's about 150 yards the direction I walk in.
Okay.
But the pinch point from like a field corner to that, where the flooded area of that pond comes in, it's about 100 yards.
Okay.
I mean, it's bigger than I'd like it to be, but I picked it. I mean, I've got a mineral site out there in that area, and it's kind of an open area.
Yep.
When I say open area, I mean like 50-yard circle almost, and then the rest of it is you can't walk through it without getting your eye poked.
Right.
Honeysuckle thick. So
gotcha.
I found the easiest spot to be able to get a couple shooting lanes and closest to where I wanted to be, and just prayed that it would work out there.
Yeah.
And it did.
You kind of knew the buck was in the area, and then the rest of it was just in God's hands after that.
Pretty much. You know what? Afterward, because the doe was small, and me and some of the other guys were talking, I honestly don't think she was in heat yet, but because he wasn't on her initially. He had to come in when he heard crashing and all that nonsense from the little buck chasing her. We're thinking the doe in heat scent that I had out had both these bucks convinced she was in heat.
Interesting.
Because November 1st, I mean, there's plenty of does coming to heat then, but that's still kind of early.
A little early, right.
Especially for what looked like not much, maybe a 2.5-year-old doe.
So you're kind of thinking you tricked the 2 bucks that same day.
We'll call you
what I think. Because the little buck wasn't with her initially.
That's crazy. We got a name for you, Matt. We're going to call you the Buck Whisperer.
The Buck Whisperer. I like it. Very nice. Now, Dusty, you have when I first showed you a picture of Big Frank, and I didn't tell you the name of the buck at that point, but you told me you had a relationship with this buck because you've seen it before.
Yeah, you sent me the picture via text, and really quickly it came to my mind that I seen that buck at the Ohio Deer and Turkey Expo up in Columbus, Ohio, and I was very fortunate enough to be able to go check that buck out.
That's pretty cool. So, Matt, Dusty had seen your deer, which is completely ironic because you came in through a different avenue. But here, it's amazing the lives that these deer take on after you harvest them. Never mind when they're in the woods. It's these nice bucks actually become legends in a sense.
Oh yeah, and especially anymore the text messaging, because I mean, once I put it on Facebook, it kind of blew up.
Right.
I mean, I realize there's plenty of bigger deer that get shot every year, but anything that's of significant size makes its way across all sorts of media. And because I had some guys at work that were down in Texas at the time, and somebody that lived down there showed them a picture, and they're like, "Hey, you guys have all your deer up in Ohio look like this?"
Right.
And he's like, "My gosh, that's my buddy." And
right.
They're like, "You know this guy?" And it's like, how did that guy get the picture?
Right.
Right. That's very cool.
I mean, the beauty of Facebook.
Now, Matt, did you have the deer processed, or do you do it yourself?
I had it processed.
Gotcha. And how?
I'd already shot a doe that year, so there's somebody at work wanted deer meat, so I said,
and how was
pay the processing fee and it's yours.
How was Big Frank in the skillet?
They said it was great because I'd warned them. I said this was a big old fat deer,
big old nasty deer. Yeah,
it's like it might be gamey.
Yep.
And they said it was as good as any deer meat they'd ever had. But that being said, within an hour of shooting it, I had it gutted and cleaned out, and I think that's kind of a big thing.
Gotcha.
Is to get all the parts that could make it taste bad off quick.
Yep.
Get the internals out.
That's it. It starts there. Starts with a good shot. Second piece is getting it cleaned and cooled out as fast as possible. Matt, what if you had to pick a few different tips and tricks for our listeners? What would you say are the 3 most important things in deer hunting to be successful?
Have fun is number 1. Just for the fact of if you're not having fun, you're going to be careless and not be doing a lot of the things you should, like sitting still and putting the right amount of time in. 2 would be preparation, like paying attention to where you're putting stands, getting your shooting lanes done, and getting it all done in time early in the season. Like you won't find me out there in September trimming trees and hanging tree stands generally, unless I just found the perfect spot. And another thing with that, like I start putting mock scrapes out, and I've got my stands in areas where I know deer move through from sign, but I want to try and build some mock scrapes out there that make the dominant buck think, well, there's all sorts of little bucks coming through this area all the time, and you get territorial. And then once like November starts to hit, then I'll have some estrus in it, but I want them coming through there scent checking my area often. And so the mock scrapes are a big thing to me.
Okay.
And then next thing would be scent control. And I know plenty of people that say you could go out there in regular church clothes and be fine. I've plenty of guys that shot big deer that way, but to me it's maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but I'm not going to take that chance. I put a lot of time into prepping my spots to not go off on a whim. So, and another, I guess it'd be a 4th one, but I don't.
Yeah. Add as many as you need to.
No, a big thing I do is like when I do use scents, I don't like using stuff that's been sitting on a shelf for a year.
Okay.
Yeah. You get a fresh bottle of deer pee, and it smells night and day different than something that's been sitting at a store for a year or 6 months, or may not even be from one deer, So my theory generally is if you're going to put all the time in and effort, try and do everything right. And that's
absolutely
pretty simple for me. Then there's the whole better lucky than good factor.
Say that again?
Better lucky than good.
Gotcha.
I'd rather be lucky sometimes than good at it.
I agree. No, there's definitely an element of luck that's involved in all this. No question. Yep. Dusty, what other questions do you have for Matt?
Yeah, I just, I really don't, Matt. You've covered a lot of ground there, and man, congratulations on an awesome Ohio whitetail.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was thrilled.
I would
didn't
be too.
think I never imagined I'd get that lucky. We put work in, but like I said, you could sit there all year and not see anything and have somebody else come sit there for a day and get that one. So
Matt,
I was definitely blessed with that deer.
I have a feeling that the Matt Hiatt 2014 deer season's already underway if you're the planner that I think you are.
Oh, yeah. Once this negative temperature goes away, we're already starting to coyote hunt because there's a problem and it's starting to affect our deer hunting. And once it warms up a little bit, we're going to go in and start trimming some woods to get some food plots into those fields for next year.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a year-round planning type of situation, and that's why you're shooting big bucks.
This is when you go shed hunting, or even when it snows like this, it's an amazing time to go scout for deer. It's the easiest time in the world to see tracks.
Right.
They tell you where they're at.
Exactly. You see where they sleep. You get a fresh snow on the ground, go out that day. After the snow's done, you can see what just moved and get a good idea on maybe the next year where they start living that time of year. As they rotate through the seasons, they live a little different.
Right.
But I don't know. Snow's a big thing, so getting out and shed hunting can be beneficial for your next year season.
Matt, when do you actually start making your mock scrapes and hanging your stands?
Most of the stands, we'll pull them. Some of them we've already pulled this year, and our deer season's still going here. But we'll start pulling them usually once the snow's off and it dries out enough we can get trucks back in the fields, just so we don't have to carry them out. But like a lot of the ladder sticks, we'll leave those out there and just loosen the straps on the tree so the tree growing doesn't stretch the straps and get them to a breaking point. But then we'll go back out, and usually early August or even July, we'll go out and start cutting shooting lanes and hanging tree stands.
Okay.
But you got to be careful cutting shooting lanes in July, because once November hits and there's no leaves, you can leave yourself wide open.
Good point. Yeah, it's we got a little bit of skill involved in what's ahead. Absolutely, totally agree. Matt, this has been great. Thank you for telling us the story of Big Frank and all the tips and tricks that you use along the way to make yourself a more successful deer hunter. I know our listeners will greatly appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back again when you find some of those other big bucks that are hanging out in that area. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to come talk to you every year.
I would love that, yeah. And so we're going to plan on it.
Yeah. Mark it down.
We're going to mark it down. So don't disappoint us, Matt. Go out there and shoot some more big bucks.
You got a name
plan next year.
You got a name for any of them other big bucks out there on your farms?
I'm calling the new one Baby Frank, just because it's younger and looks the same. No, it's not very creative, I know.
Baby Frank. That's good. It works for me. It's the lineage of Big Frank. Absolutely.
Fits the role.
We'll see what he turns out to look like next year.
Right.
So,
well, very good, man.
The winter's not too hard on him. But
yeah, definitely. Right. Give me a picture over at Chubby Tines Outdoors on Facebook.
Chubby Tines Outdoors.
Yeah, check it out.
Well, Matt, I appreciate it, and we'll let you go. We've taken up enough of your time, but Dusty and I could talk about this all night, and I'm sure you could too.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Well, thanks again, Matt. We'll let you go, but we'll stay in touch.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on there.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. We'll talk to you soon.
All righty.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Dusty, I absolutely love stories like what Matt just told us.
It don't get no better, Jay.
That's the quintessential piece of the Big Buck Registry. That's why we're here, to preserve, protect all the stories, sport, and spirit of big buck deer hunting. And if we never did another show, that would be the one I'd point back to say that's what we were all about.
For sure, and if you got a great story like Matt's, give us a call.
Yeah.
Find us.
We're going to take, like, in this case, Matt actually wrote an article, and we're going to put it in our show notes. The article is there for all to read, but the podcast is there for all to listen to. And that's what we want to know. So if you've written an article, if you've had an article written about a deer you've had before, give us a call, 724-613-2825. Let us know that you're ready to tell the world your story in your words, not the writers, in your words, about how this hunt went down. And we will walk you through the process. We'll walk you through that story. And we'll make sure that we cover every little detail that is important to that story. And we're going to make you kick back, relax, and just be yourself. That's
at one point in time there, Jay, I was actually sitting in the tree stand.
Yes.
In this 100-yard patch of cross through.
Yep.
By a pond. I was enjoying myself, and here come Big Frank. The story was so real.
It was insanely real. I was recreating the experience through Matt, but I felt like I was Matt.
Right on.
Like I was sitting in his stand with that camera swinging around, and I could see the small pie plate opening in the honeysuckle.
I was with you.
Yeah. And the deer, the doe running up, and then the small buck running behind, and then here comes Frank.
Big Frank. And what a story.
I know. What a great story.
Awesome story. Matt, thanks for sharing it.
Exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. Matt, if you're listening, and I hope you are, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It means the world to us and all of our listeners at the Big Buck Registry. Speaking of listeners, Dusty, how can our listeners reach you?
Yeah, you check us out at www.facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, how can the viewers get a hold of you?
Lots of different ways. We have many ways for you to contact us so that we can tell your story about your big deer. You can call us 724-613-2825. You can send me an email to j@bigbuckregistry.com. You can visit our website, bigbuckregistry.com. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We even have a Twitter account, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. And of course, if you are a listener of podcast, as I am, as Dusty is, you can listen to our podcast on many different directories. You can join us on Libsyn. You can join us, which is spelled Libsyn. You can join us on iTunes, so you can listen on any Apple device, and you can share any of these podcasts with your friends or post them on your Facebook page. You can find us on Stitcher. You can find us on TuneIn Radio, and you can find us on Blueberry, spelled Blubrry. Those are all the podcast directories. And please share these stories with your friends, these podcasts with your friends, and let them know what's going on over here at the Big Buck Registry. Dusty, I think that's a wrap, man.
Yeah, awesome. Matt, thanks again, buddy. And we'll talk to you all next week right here on the Big Buck Registry, Big Buck Podcast. Your host is
Jay Scott.
And I'm Dusty Phillips.
We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.